Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Sometimes you're able to pinpoint an exact moment where everything went wrong in a player's career. You can point toward one moment, and from that point on, they stopped ascending and started to slide down the mountain. Sometimes it's because of an injury, which makes sense that the player wouldn't be as effective coming off of the injury as they were beforehand. Sometimes it's because of a coaching change or a scheme change, or there's one game that completely messes up a player's psyche. But I'm guessing you haven't heard a story quite like this one before. This is Miami Dolphins running back Mark Higgs. At one point, he was a pretty solid runner who helped the Dolphins make it to the postseason and win the AFC East. He was playing some of the best football of his entire career, and was showing absolutely no signs of slowing down. And then, completely out of nowhere, his career came crashing down because he was the victim of identity theft. Seems kind of hard to believe that an NFL player would be an identity theft victim, but that's exactly what happened to Higgs in 1992, and nothing was ever the same. This is the story behind the bizarre ending to Mark Higgs' NFL career. Before I talk about the actual identity theft in question, we need some context to understand just who Mark Higgs is, how well he was playing, and just how something like this could even happen in the first place. There are some players that instantly find success with a team that drafted them. Higgs is not one of those guys, because he had to bounce around quite a bit to get to where he was. The Kentucky running back was drafted in the 8th round of the 1988 NFL Draft by the Dallas Cowboys, but with Herschel Walker getting all the touches, there was no way that Higgs was ever going to see the field. He found his way on the Philadelphia Eagles in 1989, but didn't do a whole lot there, as he ran for just 184 yards, fumbled 3 times on 52 touches, and never found the end zone. It seemed like Higgs was going to have some trouble sticking around the league, as in 1990, after being named a Plan B free agent, he was going to find himself on his 3rd team in 3 years. During that 1990 season, Higgs signed on with the Miami Dolphins. Once again, just like he was in Dallas, he was buried on the depth chart. Ahead of him, you had Sammy Smith, the team's first-round pick in 1989, Troy Stratford, who had fallen off a bit but still had some solid accolades to his name, as he was the 1987 AP Offensive Rookie of the Year, and he had Mark Logan, a player who was a journeyman but still averaged 5 yards per carry whenever he got the ball. Higgs was 4th on the depth chart, and only touched the ball 10 times that season. 3 seasons into his career, and he had just over 250 rushing yards, never finding the end zone. In 1991, though, everything changed. Higgs overtook Logan on the depth chart, Smith got injured, and Stratford was now in Kansas City. Somehow, Higgs was now the starting running back. He was finally going to get an opportunity to prove himself and show that he belonged in the NFL. And he took advantage of this opportunity. He had over 100 rushing yards in each of his first 2 games that season. He actually did a pretty good job holding onto the ball, fumbling just 3 times in 242 touches. He had 900 rushing yards on just under 4 yards per carry, and was 8th in the league in rushing yards per game that season. The 1991 season was a prove-it year for Higgs, and man did he prove it. And the 1992 season was all about building on top of that, and safe to say, he did just that. Higgs started off the 1992 season on an incredibly high note in Miami's season opener against the Cleveland Browns. Oddly enough, the Dolphins didn't begin their season until week 2, and the reason they didn't play that first week had to do a bit with the Irish band U2 of all things. If you want to learn more about that bizarre situation, then click the card in the upper right corner. Anyways, in front of a national television audience on Monday Night Football, Higgs led the Dolphins to a 27-23 win on the road against the Cleveland Browns. It was the first time in his career that he scored 2 touchdowns, and the second one was the game winner with 7 seconds left. For anyone that doubted whether or not Higgs was legit or was just a one-year wonder, this season debut answered a lot of those questions. And Higgs continued to play well throughout the remainder of the season. He had 111 rushing yards and over 4.8 yards per carry the following week against the Los Angeles Rams. He had a stretch in the middle of the season with 5 rushing touchdowns in 5 games, including a 2-touchdown performance in a 21-17 victory over the Atlanta Falcons. Higgs scored both offensive touchdowns that day, as the other one came off of a pick 6, and scored the game winner in the 4th quarter. He had over 100 yards rushing on over 5.3 yards per carry in a dominant 28-0 shutout victory on the road against the Indianapolis Colts. And he had a 94-yard performance on Monday Night Football in a 20-7 victory over the Los Angeles Raiders. Entering Week 16 against the New York Jets, the Dolphins were playing arguably their biggest game of the season. Win this game, and not only do you clinch a playoff spot, but you are still alive in the AFC East race, as you can still overtake the Buffalo Bills atop the division and win it for the first time since 1985. Lose the game, and not only are your playoff hopes dependent on what happens in Week 17, but the Bills officially clinched the AFC East, as they would be 2 up with 1 to play. Miami won it in dramatic fashion, winning at 19-17 on a late field goal, and Higgs was a big reason why, as he had 80 yards rushing on over 4.7 yards per carry. Through the first 16 weeks, Higgs had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, and found the end zone 7 times, which was tied with Mark Duper for the most on the team. He was the only player with more than one rushing touchdown, and while not great or one of the league's best by any means, he was a fairly solid player who played a big part in that offense. However, right after that Jets game, at seemingly the highest point of his career, everything came crashing down in spectacular fashion. On Tuesday, December 22nd, at 2:45 in the morning, just over 24 hours from the Dolphins clinching a spot in the postseason, Higgs was coming home from the team Christmas party and was speeding on the interstate in Broward County. The cops pulled him over. Normally, this would be a routine traffic stop. Higgs would either get a warning or would get a ticket and would then be free to go on his way. However, as the deputy was running a background check on Higgs after pulling him over, he noticed something odd. Turns out, Higgs had some grand theft and worthless check charges. On top of that, in 1991, Higgs was billed for thousands of credit card charges, over $50,000 worth, that he never actually paid. With that, Higgs was arrested. The only problem? As you could probably guess by the title of this video, Higgs did none of that whatsoever. All of this was done by a man named Irving Bailey. Bailey started impersonating Higgs in 1991. The two men were neighbors, and in May of 1991 were even roommates. While the two men were roommates, Bailey did what every good roommate does, and copied all of Higgs' documents. Bailey was able to get some credit cards out of it, a driver's license, and a few other things. Higgs wasn't necessarily surprised by this, saying that knowing Bailey, he halfway expected this mistaken identity incident to happen at some point. As one sheriff spokesman said, they knew who Higgs was, and he seemed sincere. But still, when you have somebody pulled over and you have records that indicate that he's wanted, you can't just release him. Eventually, after 3 hours, after all that confusion, Higgs was released from jail on a $2,000 bond. While he didn't speak to the press on Tuesday, he was in surprisingly good spirits about the whole thing on Wednesday, and laughed the whole thing off. As Higgs said, there were some rough-looking guys in there, and here I was in a suit, since I had just come from the team Christmas party. Oh man. Obviously, nothing happened to Higgs. He was not fined or suspended by the team or the league, he did not owe any money, and all he got was a warning for the speeding incident. But what's incredibly bizarre about this entire situation is that at that exact moment, even though Higgs brushed the whole thing off, everything in his NFL career fell apart. To close out the 1992 season, the Dolphins were traveling on the road to Foxborough to take on the New England Patriots. The stakes were simple. If Miami won and Buffalo lost, then Miami would win the AFC East and had a shot at getting a first-round bye. If both of those things did not happen, then the Dolphins would be a wildcard team. The good news for Miami was that they got their dream scenario. It wasn't easy by any means, but in a 16-13 overtime victory, Miami was able to win the AFC East and position themselves nicely heading into the postseason. The bad news was that Mark Higgs struggled heavily. He had 9 carries for 23 yards, averaging a mere 2.5 yards per carry. In games where Higgs carried the ball at least 9 times, or more than twice a quarter, it was easily his worst output of the season. Under those circumstances, it was a season-low 2.56 yards per carry and a season-low 23 yards. In fact, if you looked at every game where Higgs carried the ball at least 9 times in his career, the 23 yards rushing was the lowest total of his career up until that point. It was that bad. And to make matters worse, Higgs suffered a pretty nasty knee injury during the game, which is the last thing you want to see happen. Even though Higgs helped Miami get to the postseason, he was unable to help Miami past that point. Due to the knee injury, Higgs was placed on injured reserve. He did not play in Miami's 31-0 divisional round victory over the San Diego Chargers, and did not play in Miami's 29-10 loss in the AFC Championship against the Buffalo Bills. After such a solid season where he had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage and had a realistic shot at crossing the 1,000-yard rushing mark entering the final week, it all fell apart at seemingly the worst possible time. And unfortunately for Higgs, his career would never recover from that point on. Higgs' production levels declined in 1993, as he lost his starting job to third-round pick Terry Kirby. During the 1993 season, Higgs scored just 3 touchdowns, with his touchdown output getting sliced in half. Despite playing all 16 games, he had 7 games where he finished with less than 20 yards rushing. During one absolutely atrocious 5-game stretch toward the end of the season, he had 57 rushing yards on 25 carries for an average of 2.2 yards per carry, and didn't find the end zone during that time period. After the season, Higgs stayed in Miami, but took a 44% pay cut to do it. Instead of making $810,000 like he was supposed to, he only made $450,000. Higgs said that he didn't blame the Dolphins for this, and that he was settled here, didn't want to learn a new system, and thought that he could make it up if he had a good year. He did not. Higgs was cut midway through the 1994 season after picking up just 68 total yards and never finding the end zone. Eventually, he signed with the Arizona Cardinals, but did next to nothing with them. In 7 games with the Cards, he had just 127 yards on 3 yards per carry, and also never found the end zone. Higgs never played another game in the NFL after the 1995 season. And you can look at the identity theft moment as the exact moment that everything came crashing down. Consider this. Higgs played 58 games from the start of the 1991 season until the end of his career. It's a perfectly even split at 29 games before the incident and 29 games after. In the 29 games before, he had 1,800 rushing yards on 3.7 yards per carry, 11 rushing touchdowns, and over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. In the 29 games after, he had just over 900 rushing yards on roughly 3.5 yards per carry, less than 1,000 yards from scrimmage, and 3 touchdowns. His production was sliced by more than half. It seemed like Mark Higgs had it all made. He had his Dolphins winning games, he was playing some good football, and he was at an all-time high. And then, the identity theft incident marked a clear and obvious turning point in his career. Obviously, there were many reasons why Higgs' production declined, and to blame it all on identity theft would be silly. But it is weird how that all played out. Mark Higgs made a name for himself in the NFL, and Irving Bailey all but ended up destroying it. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes, link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JRGator9 and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special links to all of our Patreon supporters to help grow the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.